Warm welcome. Today is an EPSO Ask Me Anything session, which is very timely in the context of the new competition system that was launched at the end of January, at least on paper, and it's going to take effect the first time EPSO launches new competitions, which are scheduled for May. So in a couple of weeks, we're expecting the first new exams to be launched under the reformed selection procedure that was put in place a couple weeks ago. So with that, let me just say a few introductory words, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. And hopefully the clicker works. It does, and presumably the sound works on your end. Not so much on our end, but we're going to figure it out. At least everybody can hear us and listen to all the wisdom that we're going to be sharing with you. So with that, some basic remarks. You might know my background, you might know EU training, you certainly do because you signed up there and you're joining us through the website, and the Ultimate EU Textbook, which has been in publication since 2006. And just to put a word out there, many of you asked me if a new edition is coming out. Yes, the answer is yes. There is a new administrator edition coming out, most likely in a couple of weeks. So sometime in the second half of May, early June the latest, there's going to be a new Ultimate EU Textbook coming out. And also for the Assessment Center, which is going to have a new name given the changes in the new system. Tiziana, you might want to say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's nice to be here today with you, supporting you in that new journey. Okay, we are together with you training. So I am a trained psychologist with over 20 years experience in HR. Okay, so my background is in HR, focusing on recruitment, selection, training and development of candidates, supporting you in the selection procedures for EPSO and the new recruitment. Okay.
Yeah, this is my turn. Okay, because I don't have your audio, so I don't know what Tiziana was saying, but I have full confidence. She gave a great introduction about herself, and while we're figuring out a little bit the audio and how to patch that into my ears. But with that, a couple of basic recap of how the new system is going to look like. And just if you could help me advancing the slides. Okay, it did work for a second. There's a bit of loop there. So we're going to be sharing a special exclusive link at the end of this live session, which you can use to buy any of our products and any of our services, except for the personal coaching and in-person products. But everything else, you're going to get a special discount code we're going to be sharing in the end. And then if we could have the slides back, please. A small recap about the new system, worth remembering. And first of all, a disclaimer, we are not EPSO. We are not the European Personnel Selection Office. So whatever we tell you is based on the most up-to-date information that we have gathered over the many years of experience and most recently. But the official source of information is always the EPSO itself and the notice of competition as it will come out. Having said that, we are doing our very best to be as accurate as possible and also tell you upfront if something we are certain about or other stuff that we are still speculating. So what is that little recap? The new system, the model was adopted on the 31st of January, so a couple of weeks ago, or basically 2 months ago. And it's the final version of the reformed selection procedure. And in that, for ongoing competitions, so competitions that had been launched prior to that date, chances are these are going to stay as they were announced. Now, that's not 100% certainty, but a very high likelihood. Also, because there was a small change, not just that how the new system is going to take place, but there was a change that a competition, an assistant competition, was canceled due to various reasons that we can discuss. So one competition was actually canceled. So we're still observing whether it may have an impact even for ongoing competitions. So not just the new ones that are going to be launched as of May, presumably May, because that was announced, but also the ones that are happening right now. Now, if you have been invited to an assessment center because your exam has reached that particular phase, that's certainly happening. So that's what you need to prepare for, and those are the conditions that are you need to be mindful of. But again, if your exam has not reached the assessment center stage yet, there's a tiny, tiny chance that it might change. But again, more likely than not, it's going to be as announced in the original notice of competition. But then again, with the new system, the one that has been adopted and soon put into practice, there is no more assessment center. So that's something that we're going to come back to, or if you have questions, we're going to give some details. No more assessment center. A single cohort or single set of exams will be the new rule. And those exams, as you most likely know, and you can see now on the screen, you will have the pre-selection. Well, you see, I keep using the old term. It's no longer pre-selection. These are the reasoning tests. So the abstract, verbal, and numerical reasoning tests. That's what we call CBT, computer-based tests. And then for generalists, you have EU knowledge tests. And then for specialists, you have the specialist multiple choice tests. And then there is a written exam in the form, most likely, of a case study. And then there's a digital skill test, which is still up in the air. It's not 100% decided how that's going to feed into the new setup. Chances are it will be part of the requirements, but then again, it's not 100% yet decided as far as we know. And with that, universal remotely proctored test, so everything is going to take place remotely in the sense that you need to use your own computer and sit the test using that particular computer. And if you don't have any, then you need to get hold of one. We are offering this kind of service at our Brussels office, the very place I'm broadcasting this from, the Ambiorix Center. We're very close, almost overlooking the Berlaymont. We are in the EU quarter, so if you have that need, you're welcome to get in touch, and then we figure out the logistics of how we can assist you. Obviously, we have nothing to do with the exam itself, so we can help with the logistics, provide you a silent space and a suitable computer. So with that, and then there's the CAST exams. Again, you might have questions around that because there has been a slight change recently. So the contract agent exams, which will essentially be a little bit simplified because there's no more domain-specific multiple-choice test, which is required by the EPSO part, but it's only required by the recruiting institutions. Right. So with that, what else do I have there? That's pretty much it as a very basic summary, and just as a footnote on the competition, the AST3, the 154, that was canceled due to a multitude of reasons. So again, it might have a certain impact, especially on how the remote testing takes place. So with that, I won't say anything else. I don't know, Tiziana, if you have anything to add. Hopefully the audio will be patched to my ear, so I will even hear what you have to say. But maybe you just want to say a few intro words, and then we really open it up for questions. Ask us anything about EPSO. So Tiziana, over to you.
Yeah, what I would like to add here is that EPSO mentioned that main change is because they want to implement a faster and leaner competition model. Okay, so that's why they are mainly doing those changes. And also because the timing, okay, that usually we have for a competition since the beginning up to the end, and we have that level. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because basically, I mean, the timing nowadays for the... Thank you, Christina, for letting me know. So thank you, everyone. Okay, too much noise. I believe now it's better. Jacopo and Mira, just let me know if it's better now. Okay, cool. So just to let you know that, so they want to make the competition process leaner and simple, okay, to all the candidates. And also they want to reduce the timing, okay, the average time today from the moment that you apply up to the moment that you have the reserve list. Nowadays, the average is 13 months. And they want to reduce it for 6 months, okay, or maybe shorter than that. So that's the expectation for the new system for the open competitions specifically. Okay, so I would like to add that information, Andras.
Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at my device. I'm asking Jofi to feed me the questions so I can see it directly on my phone, so we can answer whatever you are interested in. So Jofi, if you could go ahead, feed that into my feed, and then I can answer the questions. And I take a quick look of what else is coming in. So further changes about the CAS procedure. Oh yeah, here's the first one. Where can I check my rights and obligations if I pass any EU job and become a civil servant, for example, for the EU and, for example, in Belgium? Well, rights and obligations, staff regulations. So you have the staff regulations that you can look up, and it has everything that needs to be known for you as an EU civil servant working for a public administration. And it sets out salary, it sets out childcare rights, and it sets out professional obligations. Everything that you need to know is right there. All right. If a candidate had passed the first phase in a previous competition, but he or she didn't pass to the next phase, can you use those marks? No. The short answer is no. You cannot use that achievement that you have realized in a previous competition. You need to restart from scratch. Basically, every competition is a standalone set of exams. So whatever the results you got in a previous one does not carry over to a new competition. Right, next question. Could you elaborate further on the new changes in the CAST procedure? So how the CBT, computer-based tests, will be organized? Is there a change in the tests, in the content too? Well, as far as we know, so contract agent tests, they don't change in substance. So the change that was announced was that the abstract verbal numerical reasoning tests will be still administered, will be still required, but then the field-related tests, so the one that truly connect you to the specific domain for which you applied, will be then run by the recruiting institution, which is not EPSO. So again, we'll need to see how that plays out in practical and substantive terms, but that's pretty much the change that we're aware of. And then Tiziana, I don't know if you're aware of anything else. Let me check if we found a workaround for the audio so I can hear you.
Okay. So another thing that I would like to add here is related to the competence-based interview. So where we can check the behavioral aspects. So I think it's better to mute Andras. Thank you. So I was mentioning that because besides the field-related interview, so related what connects you with the job itself, so the technical aspects, there is also the behavioral aspects. Okay, so when we see a vacancy notice, we also realize the analyzing, okay, and providing solutions, skills, okay, sometimes leadership skills, sometimes learning and development, working with others. So there are also the behavioral aspects that they might be checking as well during the interview itself. But who will be doing those are really the recruitment services, okay, not EPSO anymore. They won't be responsible for that. Of course, if required, they can also provide services, okay, but it's not anymore the obligation, okay. I cannot hear you, Andras. Maybe it would be better to unmute him.
Yeah, can you hear us now? Okay, well, we work it out. It all works out in the end. So when it comes, so for specialist competitions, 86 economists, the written test, is that really a case study to assess the general drafting skills, or is it expected to be an essay on an economics related topic? That's a really good question. And the answer is based on what we know right now. And again, it might change, but based on what we know right now, the written test is going to be a case study, and it's going to be independent of that particular domain. And again, based on what we know now. So it's not going to assess your knowledge in economics. It's going to be based on general skills. As you know, and as Tiana, I think you mentioned, though the audio was still a bit patchy there, you have the competency framework, right, with 8 competencies which have been changed compared to what used to be. But even these 8 competencies, 4 of which are going to be assessed through the written test. So even for economists or even for any other domain, these are going to be only looking at these general competencies, 4 of them, not all 8 of them, so 4 of them. But the domain-specific knowledge, so your knowledge of economics in this case, is not going to be part of the evaluation through the case study. On the other hand, your domain-specific knowledge, so economics in this particular case, is going to be tested through multiple choice tests. So there's going to be a multiple choice exam which looks at your domain-specific knowledge. And again, this is what we know right now, and we'll see the notice of competition because the concept might change, but it seems to be that the written test, the drafting one, or I should show typing movements rather than handwriting because it's on a computer. So that is only going to look at your general competencies and not the domain-specific ones. Tiana, anything to add?
Yes, I would like to mention about those general competencies that you mentioned. Thinking about the new framework, we can think about critical thinking, analyzing and creative problem solving, decision making and getting results, communication for sure. Okay, so those are the main competencies that we can also, I mean, based on our knowledge from the recent how case studies handled today, and doing that comparison to the new model, those are the competencies that they really, I mean, they are connected, okay, somehow.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. Question? Pretty much, yeah, that's only for me. It's about the new EU textbook, whether it's going to have EU knowledge questions, and the answer is yes. So it's going to have at least 100 EU knowledge questions, presumably more. So we are just working on finalizing that. It's going to include those. More information about EU knowledge, please. So EU knowledge, what do we know about it right now? Well, EU knowledge tests used to be the rage prior to 2010, when the big reform of the EPSO system took place, and now they're coming back. So EU knowledge refers to a very broad area because it can include decision making, it can include perhaps a bit of EU history, it can include EU policies, the key components or key elements of EU policies, it can include institutional knowledge, so how the institutions work and operate. So it's pretty broad. Now, EPSO that EU knowledge will be required for generalist competitions only, which are scheduled to take place, or at least scheduled to be launched late September, early October this year. EU knowledge is not required for specialist competitions, right? So that's a bit different. And EU knowledge tests are also required right now for many of the European Commission internal competitions. So just to recap, for specialist competitions, EU knowledge tests are not going to be part of the requirements. And again, what kind of topics do they include? EPSO said that they will publish. I almost said the word reveal, but I mean, it's not a big secret, but they're going to publish the broad, either the areas or the specific sources from which they constructed or created these particular multiple choice tests. So that's good news because it limits perhaps the scope of what you need to study because it's such a vast area otherwise. All right, yeah. Next question. Tiziana, go ahead.
Yes, I just would like to add here when they're going to publish this. Okay, so when, it's really when they release the notice of the competition of the generalists, they will be also informing all the candidates the sources where they can base their study.
Yep. Next question. I see many are coming in. By the way, whatever question we cannot answer right now, we're going to find a way to write the memo or find a way to answer those, or maybe just record a different event and do that. But we'll make sure that no question is left behind. What sources would you recommend for the EU knowledge test? So once again, EPSO will publish those sources, so they're going to help you guide you towards the right resources. But as far as I know, and I think our Budapest team can help you out, we already have a list of good resources and books and e-courses and websites where you can dig deeper into the EU knowledge. So that's a free blog post or tips and tricks article that we put out. So as far as I know, it's already been published and available. So those are the ones we try to help you with. How can we practice for the written test? So let me plug in a little commercial. We do have a written test, a case study simulation on our website, and you can take it twofold. You can either just take the actual written test and practice by yourself based on the background materials and familiarizing yourself with the interface, or you can submit an actual written test and one of our team members would evaluate that and provide you a personalized feedback. Anything else, Tiziana? What would you say to this person who's interested in preparing better for the written test?
Yeah, so what we can also offer to you is once you do the case study within our platform, you can turn to the coaches, so me plus my colleagues, and send, okay, the feedback that you received, and we can do that analysis together. So that's a way that we can practice together. EPSO has also some samples in their website where you can also practice. And another way, if you would like to, on your daily job, okay, so it's on-the-job learning. Whenever you have to perform a briefing, a report, what you can do is set some time for you to do that specific report, okay, and see how do you manage the time. See how you do look to be all the sources that you have to deliver your specific essay, okay, a report or, briefing note. So that's all. I mean, after the session today, for those who are not aware, you can use, being aware of that, seeing that I am preparing for a specific case study or written test here that we're talking about. And then you can be mindful in that sense, practicing on the job.
Great advice. Thank you so much. Couple other questions. So for the administrators in the field of transport, which is scheduled to be launched in July 2023, EPSO has forgotten to mention which AD, which administrator level it's going to be announced on. So the question, as I understand, whether it's going to be 85, 86, 87, hard for me to guess, but most likely it's going to be 86 or 87. Those are typically the levels at which so-called specialist competitions are launched. And those typically require 3 years of relevant work experience if it's 86, and 6 years of experience if it's 87. These kind of competitions are typically not launched on 85 level because those require no work experience. Next one, what features of the computer for the numerical reasoning? Can we use the keyboard? Can we delete a digit? Where can we find the same type of calculator to practice with? So, well, first of all, for numerical reasoning, you can use an on-screen calculator. It used to be the case you would be given a physical calculator, but since all the tests are administered remotely, you can only use the on-screen version. I don't think you will be allowed to have a physical calculator device in the room because that would be against the rules. The one on the screen, at least in our test interface, we try to replicate that to the best of our abilities. So really you have the same experience and you can familiarize yourself with clicking it and doing the calculations and making sure that you can work with it in a fast and a quick and efficient manner, so you're not going to lose time when you're actually sitting the exam itself. So other than that, what features of the keyboard you can use? Well, for numerical reasoning, it's multiple choice, just like the abstract reasoning and the verbal reasoning. So you won't be needing much of the keyboard other than the mouse and clicking on the answer that you think is the correct one. And then for numerical reasoning, you can also type the digits and make those calculations. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything more to be said about that. Do you know if the AC, meaning Assessment Center for IT competitions, will be exclusively remote, or will it happen on the premises in Brussels? Can you send the email for the Ambiorix Center in case we need help with the room rental and computer? So Ambiorix Center, you can Google it, you find it on Google Maps, and you can put Ambiorix Center, American spelling, not British, .eu. So you can find us there. And then for the IT competitions, I'd say 99% likelihood that's going to be remotely done. So that competition still has the assessment center because it's a legacy competition that is still ongoing, and very little or almost no likelihood that it's going to be in person. Tiana, do you know otherwise, or
no,
you agree with that?
Everything remote. Yes, I do agree with you. Exactly.
So, and especially if it's an IT competition, I guess doing it online kind of makes sense. Right, could you please let us know the level of difficulty for numerical reasoning questions in your database? Is it always the same regardless of the competition chosen, or does it correspond to the level of the 80 competition? So our database has a pretty broad variety, a broad range of difficulty of the questions, and each question is kind of encoded with a certain level of difficulty. And we try to do a kind of allocation that replicates the difficulty at the exam. So if you're sitting in an AD level competition, the ones you're going to get in our system will reflect that or replicate that for your practice. Sometimes it's even more difficult, and that's on purpose because the practice should be a bit more difficult than the real life exam. This way, even under pressure and with the stress of the exam, you can perform well. What else? Yeah, maybe just to add to this, that for AST, so for assistant level competitions, again, we adapt that in our system, and it's slightly easier to reflect what you can expect at the competition itself. Would you have any hints on what was the rationale of EPSO behind skipping the assessment center? So again, we're not EPSO and we cannot read their minds, but we hear rumors and we have many conversations with a diverse range of stakeholders who were involved in this decision. And our understanding, first and foremost, is that it was motivated by speeding up the process. So that was the number one thing, making it quicker for candidates to complete the selection procedure and eventually get on the reserve list. The idea is to complete the entire process from start to finish, meaning from the day the competition is announced, it's launched, to the day when the reserve list is thrown up, no more than 6 months. So that's the idea, which in EU terms, in EPSO terms, it's a very quick process, especially if you compare it to how long it took in the past, a year, sometimes even a year and a half, which is extremely, extremely long. Second reason behind that, my understanding is that it was really costly to run that and to train assessors, get them involved, to have candidates, especially pre-COVID, to come in person to Brussels or in some cases to Luxembourg and evaluate them doing all these exercises. So it was logistically complicated, costly in budgetary terms, and overall quite a complex exercise. Having said that, I was a big fan of the assessment center. That's my personal assessment, and I think Tiana would certainly agree with that, because it's a great and very reliable way of evaluating candidates for their suitability for the job and detecting or truly assessing their competencies, which are predetermined. And through these exercises, you can truly see the person much better than you can through computer-based tests. But then again, that's the new reality we need to live with. And maybe one word, and I think, Tiana, you have some thoughts on that as well. One more thing to add, even the assessment centers are going to be the thing of the past as of May for new exams, so not ones that are ongoing, with a little caveat that I said at the introduction. There is going to be, in some cases, all cases, few cases, but in some cases, there's going to be additional evaluation after the reserve list is drawn up, but those are going to be done by the recruiting institutions, or perhaps even on a DG, Director General level, are going to be the ones evaluating some candidates further. Now, what that means is you have the reserve list, and beyond that point, EPSO is no longer involved. We're not talking about selection anymore. We're talking about recruitment, when specific institutions want to hire people from the reserve list. But they have the right, not the obligation, but they have the right to require further tests or exams or evaluation, dare I say assessment, but it becomes a tricky thing not to be confused with a proper assessment center, from the candidates to see their suitability for a specific position. And it's a bit of a tricky situation because institutions can call upon EPSO to provide kind of a back office support to these evaluations, but EPSO is no longer going to be involved as a service or as an office, but they are perhaps there as advisors or other. But it's the recruiting institutions who may require those additional exams or evaluations. But then again, they're not obliged to do so. It's optional. And at least legally speaking, they can even hire candidates directly from the reserve list without additional tests. Tiana, what else to add?
Yes, I want to say that just to make the distinction here between assessment center and an assessment, okay? Because indeed, they do use the word assessment. So you are right, Andras. When we have an assessment center, we have many oral tests and written tests. So are many tests within, okay, I mean, to assess the candidates. We do have more than one person evaluating such a candidate, okay? So it's like the whole procedure of selection a candidate, okay? With different perspectives, I would say. That's what we have for the assessment center. When we go just for an assessment, this could be only an interview, okay? And that's how they are calling right now, the phase when you are in the reserve list and then you go for an interview, as you explained previously. What I have to say is the following: the oral tests might be there, okay? So because, as we mentioned here, and you probably know that there is this the behavioral competencies, okay, that we talked when we refer to case study. There are other competencies there that we don't see where they are assessing during the competition phase, okay? So that might be our belief, okay? We don't have the official and formal information about it, but our intuition says that for the oral tests, there will be maybe one interview, two interviews with the panelist, okay, with a panel of selection members. You might be facing a competence-based interview. You might be facing a motivation interview. You might be facing as well a situational interview, okay? So just for you to be aware that the oral tests are not anymore in the competition phase, but they might be coming after, okay? And we are here to follow it. But I'm quite sure that this may happen, okay, as well, for them to assess working together, learning as a skill, entrepreneurship, which is related to leadership, okay. And if you want a source at the moment to learn from it, you can go to their website where you have the new framework. And also you could prepare, we do have a very good ebook, it's a free ebook that our colleague Jan de Sutter created, that it's in our webpage, that you can really download it, and you can see as well the comparison between the actual and current competence framework for the new one. And then you're going to see that you don't need to panic. It's a kind of refreshment that they did. And it's somehow, I mean, they changed the names, one different here and there, but you would see that they're quite the same. And my colleague, he did exactly this comparison, and it's a very good resource for you to start preparing when you go for such oral tests phase. Okay.
Thanks for that comment. So I hope it makes it pretty clear how that is foreseen, and then there is reality. We'll see how those plans work out. Because I think even EPSO themselves, they are observing and talking to their, I think they call it client institutions. So pretty much all the EU institutions that use EPSO for the selection phase. And then they are in talks and looking at the institutions, how this is going to play out. So certain fine tuning may happen, and we ourselves are observing it. But I don't think anyone truly knows how it's going to work in practice pretty much in the second half of this year, once the first few competitions reach that phase where candidates are on the reserve list, and then the recruiting institutions are actively starting to hire people from the reserve list. So with that, a couple other questions about languages. Which languages are available for the selection? Do we still need to provide 2 languages? Based on what we know right now, the abstract, verbal, and numerical reasoning will stay in the 24 official languages. So you will be free to choose any of these, regardless of what your citizenship is. So me as a Hungarian, I could choose English, I could choose Maltese, I could choose Lithuanian. And then when it comes to the EU knowledge test, that's under discussion, it seems, whether that's going to be in English only, or all 24 languages, or perhaps English, French, or German. And certainly that's politically and legally pretty sensitive, because candidates need to be given equal access. And at the same time, you have the practical implications of which language the test should be administered in. And for the assessment center, it was understandable that the assessors themselves would make their life easier if the assessment centers are run in English or French, perhaps German. But when it comes to computer-based tests, the translation is much less a heavy lifting exercise. So there, even logistically, it's easier to provide that in all languages, but it needs to be seen how that's going to play out. Bottom line, one of the EU24 official languages plus English or French, that's a pretty safe bet. You know, beyond that, we need to see how that works out. And anyways, once you start working for the institutions, you must speak at least English. Good if you speak some French or German or one of the other main languages like Italian and Spanish. Plus, you would most likely have your I would say mother tongue, but it's not necessarily your mother tongue, because if that is a non-EU official language, that makes it a bit more complicated. But having one of the EU24 official languages plus English or French, and then perhaps German or Italian or Spanish, one of these. Anything to add? Okay, short answer to the point. Will the institution follow a hierarchy based on the result of the reserve list? Reserve lists have, let me revise myself, even before I say anything. Reserve lists in the past few years have typically not included any so-called merit groups. So back in the old days, back then when I had passed a competition, which was many, many years ago, back then there were some competitions, especially for generalists, where they had so-called merit groups, and that was based on the result of the selection procedure. Now, for many, many years now, this has not been the case. So once you passed the competition, you were placed on the reserve list, you became a laureate, and that's it. There was no ranking. Even the recruiting services had no idea what score you actually achieved in the competition, and that was irrelevant as long as you were on the reserve list, which proved that you passed all the necessary requirements. In the new system, chances are there's not going to be a ranking either. But again, I'm a bit wary, I'm a bit cautious whether to say that with complete confidence that there's not going to be the case. Who knows? The generalist competitions, so the 85, which is probably the most attractive proposition in the past 4 or 5 years, so it's going to attract a lot of candidates and a lot of interest. So rumor has it that there are going to be around 300 places on that reserve list, which again, subject to the requirements of the different institutions and subject to any kind of change. But with that assumption, having 300 people on the reserve list, they might decide that certain merit groups would make sense. I don't think that's going to be the case, but again, we're speculating at this stage, and typically the institutions will not look at any sort of ranking. All right, if this new system will shorten the selection time and the recruitment, will this also apply with the time, 6 months, that we cannot retake again the exams like the CAST? So maybe to rephrase the question for those who are less familiar with the system and its details. The contract agent exams, so the CAST exam, the CAST exams, they require abstract verbal numerical reasoning tests. And if you fail the reasoning tests in that framework, then you cannot retake it for 6 months. So there's this, what is the right word? Whatever. There's a period of 6 months when you're not allowed to retake it. And the question refers to this moratorium. I think that's the word I was looking for. Is there going to be such moratorium of 6 months that you cannot retake an EPSO exam if you fail? And the answer is no. There's not going to be any such limitation. And the rule, the principle will still apply that you can take as many competitions as you like. You can take them in parallel, so you can sign up for any competition for which you qualify and you meet the objective criteria. And also the criteria related to that particular competition. So not just citizenship, not just having a good code of conduct, not just knowing the right languages, but also having the right number of years of professional experience, if that is required, or for generalists, that is not required, but a certain bachelor degree will most likely be a prerequisite. So as long as you meet the criteria, you can apply to 3, 4, 5, any number of competitions in parallel, unless in the extremely rare and exceptional cases when the notice of competition says you cannot apply for this competition and that competition at the same time. But what typically happens is that if there are sub-profiles, so there's one main competition and within that you have 1 or 2 tracks or sub-profiles, typically you can only apply for one. But then again, it's written very clearly in the notice of competition if there's any conflict that you need to be aware of. Next question, do you know if the pass mark for the CBT, the computer-based test, will be at 50% or more? And will it be more difficult than in the previous system? I appreciate that question because something that we kind of took it for granted until very recently, that the pass mark for the abstract verbal numerical reasoning under the new system is going to be 50%, and it's not a given. So it's going to be pass or fail, but the limit, say the threshold, the cutoff, is not necessarily going to be 50% in each and every competition. So the chance, let's say you need to look at the notice of competition where they're going to either determine percentage. Let's say you need to get at least 65% of the answers right for you to pass. So the point there being, your performance, your results are not compared to the other candidates, but the cutoff percentage is not necessarily going to be at 50%. So they're either going to say it upfront, if it's 50, if it's 60 or 65 or whatnot, or I can imagine that they say, we determine the cutoff percentage on the basis of the number of candidates or the overall performance. So you don't necessarily compete with others but because there's no ranking, but the cutoff percentage may be determined based on some other factors, the number of candidates or general interest or general performance overall as a cohort of all the candidates in that competition. So I'm a little bit speculating here, but again, bottom line, it's a pass-fail, but not necessarily 50% pass-fail. And one more thing, what we have seen in past competitions from time to time is they would take maybe the abstract reasoning and numerical reasoning and combine the score and then determine a pass mark for the combined score. So you could, in some competitions, you could completely fail the abstract reasoning and completely nail the numerical reasoning and still pass because it was a combined score. Now, again, we don't know what exactly those details are going to look like in the new competitions, and it might vary from case to case, whether you need to have a pass mark for the abstract reasoning and the numerical reasoning and the verbal reasoning separately, or two might be combined, and that makes it a bit easier to pass. I don't know, Tiana, anything to add to what I've said?
Yeah, it's super clear. I mean, it's really pass and fail, as you mentioned. And the main source for all those information would be the notice of the competition. So all the communications that they provide to us and to you as well in their website, throughout their directors, it really says that the notice of the competition will be mentioning that information. So we need to wait. And of course, if we do have this information in advance, we're going to share in our channels, our social media, in our website. So, I mean, stay tuned.
Do our best. We like sharing helpful information, the very thing we're doing right now, because I know that candidates appreciate that information and it helps your preparation, helps your success rate ultimately, and that's pretty much our mission. So with that, I see here's a question which I think is pretty important to answer. It's about the multiple choice questions for specialist competitions, and the question is about the sources of preparation. So is EPSO going to publish the sources for specialist competitions just like they promised for the EU knowledge tests? At the current stage, this is not the plan. So you're not going to be told what to prepare from if you're applying for the economist competition or the one intellectual property or some of the others that are coming up. What you can do in general is certainly look at the various commission DGs, Directors General website, which deal with that particular topic. So for economists, it would be DG ECFIN and some other related DGs. You can look at the European Parliament website. They have an excellent collection of fact sheets, and that's a good summary of the EU legislation, decision-making procedure, and the core elements of a given policy in that particular field. It's pretty up to date. It's a lot of links, so you can do further reading. Annual reports are often good sources of inspiration and information. Annual report of a Commission Director General, where you look at what are the key topics, the key issues that they dealt with in the past year. And then certainly textbooks, right? Like economic textbooks, but keep in mind that this is the European Union selection tests. So these are strictly related to the EU, and they are not all over the place. So there's a certain focus, there's a certain perspective that you might want to take. And if you look at a textbook, it may not need to be Economics 101, but about the EU economic studies or related topics. I know it's broad, and I wish I could tell you these are the exact sources that you need to look at. But I think if you take any discipline, any area in which the competition may be announced in, my guess is you can find the building blocks. You can find the main areas which constitute the body of knowledge in that particular field, again, from an EU perspective.
Yeah.
I wish I could be more helpful than that. Yeah, Tiziana, I see you want to add something, but maybe just one more word. We are actually offering multiple choice tests in almost all the fields, and the ones that we're not offering yet, we will. So we're very actively doing that kind of research and conversations and contacting people who are experts in those fields to offer you multiple choice specific tests, including economics, including transport, including intellectual property, including crisis management and migration, all the competitions that are coming up. And on top of that, certainly EU knowledge. We have over 600 EU knowledge tests on our website now, and the database is going further. Over to you, Tiziana.
Yeah, another source for you to consider. So what Anders mentioned, you can start from now on, okay, as you will apply for such a competition. But still, when you receive the notice of the competition, please pay attention to the duties, okay, there, and the selection criteria as well. In my experience, like training and preparing actually candidates for written tests in the field, we see that for some competitions, not all of them, but for some, the sources, for them to create the written test is really the notice of the competition. So that might be another source that you can base on your preparation when you receive the notice of the competition. Okay, so yeah, that's another thing for me to add here.
Very good point, thank you, because the notice of competition is always a source of a lot of helpful information, sometimes even more than it might seem at first glance. And that's among the many things we're trying to do for our clients, for the candidates, is to read between the lines and get a better sense of what exactly is expected of you, also in the context of our understanding of how EPSO works and the many years through which we've been observing these selection procedures. I see there's a question about the test book, and we use the 2019 version of the test book. And you actually can, because the abstract verbal numerical reasoning is going to be just as valid and applicable for the upcoming competitions. Now, also the methodology parts in the textbook are just as applicable and relevant. Certain descriptions or parts about the procedure obviously will change, so that's not going to be applicable or relevant any longer. But when it comes to the actual practice tests in the book, those are just as applicable as before. And I'm totally talking against my commercial interest, but certainly if you have that book, it's just as handy as before. And then a new edition, as I said, is coming out, and we're mostly focusing on adding the EU knowledge test, updating the procedural parts, a little bit refreshing other parts, but those are the core elements that we are mostly replacing rather than just refreshing. But the abstract verbal numerical parts are broadly going to stay the same, so that is not going to undergo any radical updates. And then the tests, are the tests going to be held on one day, even though the computer-based tests or the reasoning tests are pass or fail? And the answer is yes. So you do basically the whole sequence of tests in a single day, and that practically means a couple of hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours, depending on how much time there's going to be given for the written test, with the knowledge that if you do not pass the abstract verbal numerical reasoning, you don't get to have your EU knowledge or specific knowledge tests scored, or your written exam scored. And I'm a little bit now wondering out loud, it's not something I've thought about before, but it does raise the question whether you're going to know immediately whether you passed or failed the reasoning tests. And if so, then it wouldn't make much sense that you take the other tests in the exam. But if the cutoff mark, the percentage that I spoke about earlier, is not known at the moment of you taking the test, then chances are you need to take all the tests, some of which may be in vain if you had not passed the reasoning tests at the beginning. So my guess, my understanding would be you need to take everything. So abstract, verbal, numerical, EU knowledge or domain-specific knowledge, and then the written exam in the form of a case study, and then perhaps a digital literacy skills test, if that's part of your particular competition. And that's the whole package that you need to take in one sitting in front of your computer or at our computer at the Empiric Center, certainly remotely. And once you're done, you're done. So you're not going to be called in for a second or third round. The next step after that is basically you receiving notification that we're happy to let you know, or we are sorry to let you know. And that means you are placed on the reserve list, or you can try another competition or the same competition if and when it's announced again. Anything else, Tiana, that I missed?
No.
Okay. Sava, when will these tests be available? EU training tests or EU knowledge tests? If you're asking about the EU knowledge tests, those are immediately already available on our website. The domain-specific tests on the upcoming fields like economics and intellectual property, those are, I think the economics, that's already being proved and uploaded as we speak. So presumably in a week or two, should be available on our website. And when it comes to the intellectual property, that's also being drafted as we speak. The same thing with a couple of other domains. So we are doing our very best to make those available by the time a given competition in that field is announced. All right, I see we're getting to the end of our time, but maybe time for a few more questions. Will the computer-based test, so the reasoning test for specialist competitions, have the same level of difficulty as for the 85, or can we expect it to be easier? I can see arguments for both cases, whether to make it easier because it's a specialist one and that's not the main tool through which EPSO wants to select you out, because they want to focus on your domain-specific knowledge. So that would be the argument to make it easier. But I can also see to make it more difficult, given that it's 86 or 87 level. So those are higher levels in the ranking, and those typically have slightly more difficult reasoning tests. So who knows? We need to see. I guess the general piece of advice applies: try to practice with difficult tests, and that's only going to yield you benefits when you're sitting the exam and it's easier than what you had expected. Right, maybe one or two. Do you think that the computer-based test, there will be a situational judgment? Well, currently in the selection procedure, reformed the new selection procedure, there is no SJT, situational judgment test. That's not part of the package that was approved under the umbrella of the new system. Situation judgment tests were in fact mentioned as an additional potential exam, or I'm cautious using the word exam, as an additional evaluation or assessment, for that matter, after the reserve list is drawn up. I am doubtful that it's going to be part of the system again, and as I just said, it's kind of floated as an idea, but not really part of any serious thinking, at least not at this point in time. What else do we have? All right, here's one question that seems to have been asked at least twice. Do you also offer services after having passed the competition to ensure you get invited for an interview and they're recruited? Tiziana, that's especially your domain, but I also have to add.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can count on us. We are really prepared to support your preparation for such an exam. Okay, all the oral exams, me and our team, we do have three actually trainers that can support you in that sense. Just to tell you what, I mean, besides the competitions itself, we also work supporting candidates for agency interviews, okay, so cost interviews. So, I mean, whenever you have an EU job that you are going to face an interview, you can count on us, okay, because then we are really like experts in that domain, and we can support you, okay, either in the field or also in the behavioral setting. In the field, just mentioning the aspect of the structure of your responses, or exactly your communication skills. Now that everything will be remote, so how you would behave in front of the camera, looking at the camera, providing the eye contact, so you know your body language. So there are many aspects that we can work together, and for sure you can count on us, okay?
Absolutely. And aside from that, there's also a webinar that I had recorded probably around 2, maybe 3 years ago, and perhaps it's time for me to do a refresher, which is about how to get a job once you are in the reserve list. So that webinar essentially talks about different ways of presenting a motivation letter, lobbying for a specific position, and how you might want to approach those head of units who have advertised a vacancy that is available for laureates who are placed on the reserve list, and a couple of other techniques that you can apply, that you can use to be hired eventually. And that becomes actually a pretty important point, because the reserve lists are slated to be larger, so more candidates will eventually be placed on the reserve list. Roughly, what we're hearing, roughly 2 times the number of vacancies that need to be filled. So if there are, say, 300 vacancies that need to be filled, the reserve list may have 600 candidates. So that is a delicate point in the new system, because despite being on the reserve list, there's no true guarantee of being hired, though the chances are extremely high, because if it's the ratio is 1 to 2, then it's 50%, or actually higher than 50% of getting hired, because some candidates just have a different situation in their life, or change their mind, or they just move elsewhere and they're no longer into getting a job. So though they are not actual competitors for a particular vacancy that you might apply for. So again, chances are still very good, 60%-ish once you're on the reserve list, but it's not 100% guarantee that you're going to be hired. And there are certain things you can do and you should do to be eventually recruited.
Yeah.
So with that,
yeah. Okay. Andras, let me just include something here, because one of the documents that we received from our sources, you know, for us as well to prepare for that session with you today, talks about when you are in the reserve list, be proactive. And that's what Andras is mentioning about this specific, I mean, that good hint that he's providing to you, also that webinar that maybe now it's time for us to record it again. So just for you as well to be aware of that networking, okay, how important it is through LinkedIn, within the institutions, knowing people around that could connect you with other people around that might be also helpful for you to get the opportunities. So once you are in the reserve list, don't wait as well, okay? So start doing your research, try to understand where are the best opportunities for you. Who are those people? Where can I find them? Where can I find them? Who can connect me with them if I don't know them? Do I see them on LinkedIn? Which is their profile? So, I mean, for you just to be really proactive in that sense, and then start, you know, your recruitment process by yourself, not expecting them to come. Okay, so Also, that aspect that Andras mentioned about motivation letter and CV, so super important. But getting back to the interviews, like the oral phase, motivation. So how do you pose your motivation to the recruiter? How as well you reply your answers within the interview. So also, I mean, just reinforce the proactive side and also the oral side of the process. Okay.
Very well. Final questions. There was one about the ECDL, the European Computer Driving License, which is related to the digital skills test, or that's the question whether the two are comparable. I'm not that familiar with the ECDL. Chances are that there are some commonalities, given the fact that it's about computer and digital literacy, though it's not only about computers, the digital literacy. It's also about understanding how to be hacked and what could be the dark web. So it's a little broader understanding of the digital space in which all of us live these days. And then one question on the contract agent candidates and the chance of getting recruited. So contract agent, again, the cast selection process is slightly different because it's demand driven. So you register in a database and then you are shortlisted, and that's when you need to sit the reasoning. And then those who pass will be in a small group from which the institutions or the specific head of unit might recruit. So again, it's more of being in that database and waiting to be found and handpicked, whereas the reserve list is really geared towards filling in the recruitment needs of the institution. So there's an ongoing active need in human resources terms to fill certain upcoming or existing vacancies. So I think with that, we are going to stop here. And Jesse, if you could put back the slide so I can share the special discount code that was promised at the beginning. So we live up to our promise. There you go. I need to quickly advance to the right one. There it comes in a second if we pass through the initial slides, and you're going to get the discount code of 20%, I believe. There you go. It's called new EPSO 23. It couldn't get more memorable than that. So feel free to use that code. You can share it with others. It's only valid for 48 hours. So you might want to plan ahead if you are planning to apply for any competition and see which product or service that we're offering would be the most applicable for your preparation. So with that, thank you so much for being here. And as I said before, I know that there are quite a few questions that we didn't have time to answer, but we're definitely going to find a way to come back to, probably in written form, to provide answers to all these very pointed and very, very specific and very high quality questions. I can see that everyone has been following very closely the new system, and we're doing our best to provide you information that is at our disposal. So with that, Tiana, also special thanks to you for joining us and sharing your insights. I really enjoyed that we could have that conversation, even though it's not a one-on-one with each participant at this event. But then again, if you have other questions or you happen to be watching this as a recording, feel free to send us a message through our contact form, and it will find its way either to me or to one member of our team, and we'll definitely get back to you and share all the knowledge that we have to help your preparation. So with that, thank you so much. Appreciate your support, appreciate your interest in the wonderful world of EU careers and EPSO exams, and we're going to keep you posted. This is a moving target. This is a new system. It's still taking shape and taking place. So I'm pretty sure we're going to have a similar event in a couple of weeks, if not a month or two, so we can always bring you the most up-to-date information. Yeah. So, Tiana?
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. And thanks, and big thanks to the Budapest team who helped put this all together, to Rita and Jofi and others who may have been involved, and to Jesse right here in the room, who was kind enough